This is Pastor Steve with a word study, number 11. And the word for today is immortality. And the definition is exemption from death, the state of living forever. And there's a biblical concept of this word is rooted in our creation, in God's image and His likeness. And at the very beginning, Genesis, we could read that and see that story in chapter 1. But God is spirit. So the reference in Genesis is not to bodily form, but to spiritual nature. And as the eternal God is also immortal, God made people, that's us, to live forever, physically as well as spiritually. At death, the body returns to dust, but the spirit lives on. Well, the ancient Hebrews believed in the survival of the spirit, although they thought of the afterlife as a shadowy existence. But the idea of bodily resurrection gradually developed, and we find really in Job's writing as well as in Daniel's some truth about this. But in Jesus' time, the Sadducees were a group of religious leaders that denied a physical resurrection, while the Pharisees, another religious group, believed in it. Jesus taught very plainly that he believed that the dead rose again. Well, in Jesus, we have God's full revelation about immortality of both body and spirit. His bodily resurrection is proof of our immortality. Well, although death is described as an enemy in 1 Corinthians 15 under Paul's writing, Paul thought of death as necessary in order that believers may receive immortal, incorruptible bodies. And those living at the Lord's return will receive transformed bodies. Well, Jesus spoke of the resurrection of life and the resurrection of condemnation. Also Daniel did as well. And so we may assume that both believers and non-believers will receive resurrected bodies, but their eternal destiny will be different. So I want to read a couple of verses that are companion verses, really, one from the Old Testament, one from the New, that deals with this resurrection of the body. In Daniel chapter 12 and verse 2, multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Now that's Daniel's writing out of the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, we find Jesus' words in John 5:29, and it says this, "Do not be amazed at this, for a time is coming when all who are in the graves will hear the voice, his voice, and come out. Those who have done what is good will rise to life, and those who have done what is evil will rise to be condemned." And of course, if you read the whole spirit of the New Testament, the only way that we can be really counted as good, the only way that we can have a transformed life to where we start living and having goodness come out of our life, is by having Jesus Christ come into our lives and truly transform us from the inside out. Now again, all of us, every person of us in all of God's creation is going to live forever. But the question is, where will that be? And you can have that assurance, and you can know as a believer and a follower of Christ, you can know that you can end up in heaven for eternity, or if you decide to reject Christ, the Bible says there is this place of condemnation and this place called hell. But the good news is we have a choice. God bless.